I am not a scholar, not in the least. The truth is, I didn't finish high school. Halfway through my life, I realized part of that was my fault and part of that was theirs. Perhaps it was because high school was never my truth. What I am is a storyteller, and I want to tell you a story. The question is, do you want to hear one? Or more importantly, are you prepared to listen? If you listen to my story, perhaps then you'll seek out the academics. Maybe you'll look for the truth. Better still, maybe you'll find the people who were here before and ask to take a seat around their fire, where you will then sit quietly and listen to the knowledge keepers as they tell you the truth. Maybe you'll still see yourself reflected in the truth. Maybe you'll see that truth reflected in you. Good or bad, these are both necessary things. So the time has come to listen. You've done enough talking. So sit back, don't be afraid, and just listen. This is how we will move this thing forward together. Welcome to Genius Loci.
That is probably the best intro that we've ever had. So thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you.
Okay, it's okay. Welcome and bienvenue to this lovely place on Treaty 6 and 8 territory, Métis Region number 4, also known as the Jasper Library. Our Genius Loci sessions are generously supported by the Friends of the Library Society and by the Canada Council for the Arts. These two groups fund the Writer in Residency program. My name is Paulette Blanchette-Dubé, and I am the Writer in Residence, and tonight's genius is Joseph Urie. Joseph Urie, right?
Yeah, that's not genius in French by any means.
Well, a genius, but people who aren't really sure about it, we're not talking even about your startling intellect, which is, what is that, right?
Startling.
Startling. A genius, in this sense, is from the Latin that means the genie of the place, or the spirit of the place. And like all of the other geniuses that we've had on the sessions, Joe is, to me, another embodiment of Jasper. If you think of Jasper as, they always call it like the gem of the Rockies or the jewel in the crown and blah, blah, blah. If we still take that metaphor, but take the diamond out of a crown, because that's awkward now, we still have a diamond. And all the multifacets of a diamond are reflected in not only the people that we see here tonight, because we have a crowd here tonight, but it's also reflected in the geniuses that we've been able to showcase, thanks to some very wonderful people. So the guardian of the place tonight is Joe Urie, and I would have had him here even if he hadn't written a book, but he has written a book. We'll talk about that later. We're still going to talk about the process and the product of a genius, somebody who imbibes the beauty and the sense of this place. So, Joe.
Yes.
How long have you lived in Jasper, and where else have you lived?
I got here in 1988, and aside from a 5.5 year period, 94 to 99, I've been here since. So what's that, about 34 years?
Sure.
34 years. We'll say about 6 years in Yukon. Hi, Yukoners.
Oh, they're in there. Oh, yeah. Our great.
Yeah. Because there's some Yukoners in there. Just put the thumbs up if you're there, Yukoners.
It's like ching, 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 ching. Okay, good. Could you describe your childhood?
We moved around a lot. I always used to joke around that my mom was either wanted by the cops or that there was, I don't know, something in that nomadic Métis blood of hers that demanded that we move around a lot. And that's how it was. And I think part of that certainly informs who I am, in that I was always, like this kind of thing, having to suddenly sit in front of a bunch of people. When you're moving around all the time and you've got new faces in front of you, it can be really nerve-wracking, but it can also steal you to a certain degree, right? Which is, I don't know.
Steal you as in steal you, or steal?
No, steal you.
Yeah, steal you.
Yeah. I think they steal you too. I mean, there's some hearts out there that...
For sure.
And now we gotta move? Mom, I just fell in love with her.
Again. Yeah. Do you think that living in different places influences you as the writer that you are?
I think everything influences everything. And of course, I just came back from a fairly long trip away and went to a lot of different places and all those different things. Even it's the simplest things, but certainly a place like Jasper, which is the longest place I've been in my 56 years, the influences are around you all the time and reminding you of things when you seemingly forget those things. And I forget a lot, so I'm glad to be here with you.
I'll remind you of some stuff.
Excellent.
Because I was wondering, not only do you, like, you've written a novel, that's for sure. You write a lot of prose, but you write a lot of poetry as well. And I've had the privilege of reading some of your work. And there's I don't know, there's like a spirit or I don't know if it's water or there's something, but there's a real energy that goes through your work. And I wonder if you're aware of that.
No,
No?
not in the least.
So I'll bring up some stuff, right? That's what I was sort of getting at as not even the subject of your work, because that's changed in the last few years as well.
Okay, wait, let me back up a sec. I am aware of it, but I have no idea what it is.
Okay.
And I don't want to know.
All right.
Because I think you get afraid that if you come to know it, that it runs away.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but I just kind of, I know it's there.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think you and I have had this conversation before where there are moments, and this I guess we'll probably touch on in process, where you've written something, you get up and you go get a sandwich or something, and you come back and you look at it and you go, there's no way in hell I wrote that.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty good.
Who's
There's no
that?
way I wrote that, right?
Yeah.
And that's this place, this
Yeah.
river or whatever,
Yeah.
you know, however you'd like to call it.
Yeah. Because I think it's really, that's what gives the spirit or the breath to the work, right? Like, it can get up and walk off the table by itself when it's really good. And your writing is like that. Even just some of the rants, not even just some, but the rants that you end up on Facebook or the musings now and looking back on things and your perspective on situations, whether it's the environment or cultural or whatever. There's a sincerity there that I think touches a lot of people.
Yeah, if I'm to recognize that, it has to be recognized that it's comes with, for me anyways, age and making a lot of mistakes, and with the people that I surround myself with who will support me in those kinds of things, because I don't think I come to that kind of empathy, or I didn't at a young age.
No.
Like, I was that dick, pardon me, who had to say something like, you suck, and see the person go, ooh, and I go, ooh, that didn't feel very good.
Yeah.
I just didn't get it right off the hop. So, I mean, it took me a hell of a long time to come around to that. But so maybe some of those things are things that I always thought about, but I'm just a little bit more measured than I may have been in the past.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think it has to do a lot with just being on the planet for a long time, just watching. And you made a big point of at the beginning to say, you know, like, listen. So I think maybe that might be a thing.
And that's something that I never did. I have some friends over here who will attest to that. And we're in some of the circles that we are in, that's imperative that you do that. And I had to learn that at a much later age in life. That it probably would have saved me a lot of hardships and heartache if I had come to it at a younger age. But that's just my path, I guess. So
it makes for good stories, though.
Sure.
Right? Like all of it.
Ran into a wall again.
Coyote. Here we go.
That's the trickster part, I suppose, right?
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you sort of a formal, I guess, just more formally, where you went to school. It sounds like you used the whole planet as a school.
I went to 9 different schools between kindergarten and I didn't graduate. I went to 9 different schools, and that's partly because of my mom and this pension for moving around, and partly because I got kicked out of, I think, 4 of them. And you know,
taste stuff. Like, you tried out a whole bunch of stuff. It's really good.
It's yeah. Again, I think I touched upon that in that opening remark, which is a part of the foreword of my book, in that part of the fault was mine, because I didn't have the patience. I didn't have the wherewithal, and part of it was there. And you are. I never had you as a teacher, and I'm like, damn it. Like, same thing. Like, you're not the kind of teachers that I had. The kind of teachers I had were focused on one avenue, and I didn't walk that avenue, and therefore I was the idiot. And I don't know if I'm bragging or not, but I used to think I was smarter than all of them, and at this age I know I was smarter than about 68% of them. But you know, it's that realization that if I had just shut my mouth sometimes, and that maybe I would have finished it, right? That kind of
Did
thing.
you go to any schools that had like a priest, like Grey Nuns and stuff like that?
I had my elementary school in Chilliwack, BC. He was a preacher.
Wow.
And Mr. Gertson, I still remember him. Funny story, because you asked about the schooling thing. Yesterday, and this is a little aside, I got a Facebook friend request and a comment from I won't say the name, but it was something like Marcus Bagshot. I'm like, I remember your energy and enthusiasm in drama class in Sardis Senior Secondary. And I'm like, who the hell is Marcus Bagshot? I think I remember that. It turns out it was the teacher.
Oh.
And so here you ask this question, and I went, Pat Stedman? Because this was one of those teachers, I had very few of them, who related to you on that sort of level that you were at. Obviously, if you were a jackass, then they had to be this person.
Well, yeah.
And you're that way, you're that way, you're that way. You were always level until the playing field wasn't level anymore, and that's usually because you kicked a hole in it or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was impressive, and I'm glad to have this opportunity to reach out to this guy. And I'd like, my kids, if you're watching this, to know, say it now before the guy's 72 years old. How much you appreciated them for who they were. There's ex-students, right? But yeah, anyway, sorry, I hijacked that.
Well, no, because that's sort of the segue going into the next question. Was there ever a teacher that recognized your genius?
Oh, I don't know about recognizing any genius, but certainly maybe appreciated that I wasn't, because they were the teachers, and I think sometimes I could tell that they were a little constricted, they were a little handcuffed, in that they were meant to deliver programming in a certain way. I didn't realize it then, but looking back I realized it, and I did encounter some of those teachers later on in life. But Patrick Stedman, Gary Wagner, and the funny thing is I say their first names. How many of you, when you don't know your teachers' first names, they were, Mr. or Mrs. or whatever. Jerry Kaufman, Fred Granzo. These were people who insisted, actually, that you call them by their first name until you pissed them off, and then it's Mr. Granzo to you, little bastard, right? But yeah, there were some people that were really cool, but I'm not necessarily sure that it was that they recognized anything in me as much as I recognized something in them. So.
Maybe that's the important part, though. Like, that's what real teaching is all about. I think is there's content, but there's always context is the most important thing. There's those feel good posters where they have it in the bathroom, I guess, to sort of bolster teachers. As you're sitting here, it's like, oh my God. And it's one of them is they'll never remember what you taught them, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And that one I remember obviously touched me a little bit because I still remember it. And I think that's true, because I always thought when I was a beginning teacher that the content was pretty exciting because I was learning it as well. And so I was like, this is fantastic! And the kids were like, but I'd be jumping around and moving desks, and they'd make plays and we'd build things, and then they go, when we did that thing, and they don't remember what it was about, but they remembered that we had a really good time.
Well, you come up in conversation with my boys in particular frequently. As a matter of fact, like, we've got some teachers in here, and I'll share that love. It happens, which is a testament again to not just yourselves, but I think this town kind of attracts that and brings out the best in the kind of people that live here, and the worst sometimes too. But that's another story.
Yeah, I think it does, actually. Yeah. We can touch on that for a little bit, because the next question was sort of like, does living here influence your work? And I think living here has influenced me work-wise, teacher-wise, but writing-wise as well. And it's that there's like a resiliency, there's there's a grit, and it does bring out the best and the worst in people, and you have to live here for a while to see both. Otherwise, you just get one or the other, and people think, oh, it's so great to live here, and you go, yeah, well, you know.
The reason is because there's no anonymity here, right?
That's true.
So you're living in a town where whether you do something really great
Yeah.
or something really shitty,
Yeah.
you'll get recognized for it.
This is true.
And it's both, they're both excellent things, you know,
Yeah.
because, I mean, if you did that shitty thing, and you really did that shitty thing, well, you should be recognized for it, and that's that, and own up and move on. That's that life lesson. I know how that works. But again, too, you know, the human ego needs to be stroked, and I don't care who you are. If you're Mother Teresa, it's a bit of a different ego, I'm sure, but knowing that you've done well, knowing that you have produced these kids who've gone out into the world, and they come home years and years later, and they're like, thank you so much for all this, right, Nikki? And and that feels good, and so therefore you do more of that, right?
Yeah.
When you're living in a city with 1 million or 2 or 3 or 4 million people, you don't get that, because that sense of community, which I think is under attack in the moment right now here in Jasper,
Yeah.
you don't feel that, and so therefore, I don't know, you become complacent about where you live and who you live with, right?
Maybe you don't even know your neighbors, right? Like
That's so true.
it doesn't matter.
So true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here you can't get away from them.
I know, I live next to this woman named Sheila. She's crazier than a shithouse. Oh no!
Hi. See, when
No.
you have an audience, it's terrible.
I know, you know, I'm sorry, Sheila.
I see her on the trail all the
Yeah,
time.
I know, it's
too.
fantastic. Like, we have our fence conversations every other day. We're leaning over the fence, and I look forward to those moments, right?
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
And you're right. Yeah, you might not know your neighbors in another town, but here you do. You know?
You really do, and you're picking up garbage, you know, and you're talking about other people's garbage and things, and you know how some people have promised to place things and some don't, and all this, and it's great because it sort of makes you realize that you're
Okay,
not
that's
as
now
crazy.
it's time for Sheila to go, yeah, you're talking about the dog shit in the backyard when you're standing around and I'm on the other side of the fence and you pretend you don't even notice it.
Move it around.
Anyway,
All right, so you got Sheila in your day, which is always a good thing.
yeah.
So what would be a typical day for you? Let's say you're working on not the tourism projects, but the writing projects.
I don't know that there is any typical day. I don't know what typical is. And I don't mean to say that in a sort of braggadocio manner, but I don't think this is a very typical place. Every day can be kind of adventurous, right? I see you follow what you guys are always up to, and your little club name, whatever it's called. Again.
Guardians.
The Guardians, yeah. Like, oh, damn, that's awesome. So that's not typical. And so, you know, going back to, I mean, process, if that's not typical either. So you get up, and I'm up early, and there's nobody awake in my house but me and the coffee pot. And we sit there together, and that's the process. Put the coffee in and get going. And just, it either goes or it doesn't, right?
Yeah.
And that's that sort of thing until the house stirs, and then it all comes grinding to a halt. At least in the moment it does, because I've got nowhere to hide. Logan, get out of the way. No.
Look at that magazine just behind you. It says Logan.
Oh.
Canadian Geographic.
Yeah.
Cool. Weird, but cool. Okay. So that's one of the things that I've noticed. I would say probably 6 out of 7 of the geniuses that have been on so far, it's mornings that are really important, and just sort of that gathering yourself, maybe before everybody gets up, before the day all starts. Like, whether it's tea, whether it's coffee, or scotch, whatever it takes, and then it's kind of a nice slow impact.
I think that you might have different answers like that, but I saw a lot of them, and the average age is morning people ages. If you had some new author who was 21, that happens at midnight oil time, right?
Perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, everyone who's been there, that happens between 12 and 5 a.m. But not.
All right. How many people are morning people?
That's
or
No.
both.
Okay. Well, that's pretty good. That's all right. I feel better now.
Those with young kids are up whenever they are. You don't get to call that.
I tried.
It's not ready. So would you say that your day is different though? Like when you were working on the novel, did you ever say, okay, today is like a writing day?
No.
I have to get
No.
this done.
Not really, because first of all, it was a weird evolution. So it evolved out of, God, I don't even know how to say this without coming across to a lot of people who don't understand things like that, perhaps as it's crazy maybe.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, but I don't know, the trickster, my story, the trickster came to me. Now I don't know, I mean there's tricksters in
You are a
cultures.
trickster, Joe.
Right.
It might very well be. I couldn't figure that out, Bob, if I was the trickster or if the trickster came to me. So I just went with the trickster came to me because I don't know if I was prepared to admit to myself that, oh my God, it's me. I'm actually the son of a bitch, right? And benevolent at the same time, but that's a trickster, right? But anyway, it came in a weird manner, and we went on a journey together, an actual real journey, and with a Maori friend of mine named Shirley. And some lads, hi lads, if you're watching. But Shirley was important to this because I speak to this as it was a whispering, and I think Shirley may have been the person who woke up the trickster, and the whispering began. But at any rate, the whispering came. So the genesis of this thing was that I had gone on this trip with him, and we covered about 11,000 kilometers. And each day I wrote.
So like physically, like in a car kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Okay.
And each day I wrote like 2 lines about what I'd seen that day through the eyes of the trickster, and this being had been gone since the end of the 1800s.
Right.
Due to the fact that he felt that this world had changed so drastically he couldn't find his own place in it anymore. And now he'd woken up. He doesn't realize the whisper's woken him up, but he's woken him up and he's out and about and he's like, what the hell, I might as well take a walk. So he goes on this journey. It wasn't until the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that those lines went to live in a sock drawer. And they were basically gone until the Truth and Reconciliation Commission revealed their findings in the 94 calls to action. And then the trickster started going, get me the hell out of the sock drawer. And I started working on it. And Patty will attest to this. Like, I didn't really work on it much at home. I might go on a tour. And when I was doing boat trips and those people were gone for an hour and a half on the boat, I wrote the whole damn thing on an iPad. And I'd sit there for the hour and a half because that's the time that I had. Of course, the kids were younger then, so there was things that we had to do. So I just found the time when I could find the time. And fortunately, the trickster made time for me in those moments.
Yeah.
And I don't really know how to explain that, but that's just the way it is, right?
Sometimes when you don't have the luxury of time, then everything becomes like really fast and focused, and you have to do it in that time. When Andre was really young, Raymond would bathe him at night, and that's when I would write.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, I got an hour and a half. Can you make it? Can you stretch it out? Get the duck. Can you get the duck?
Yeah.
Get the duck.
And I have to admit too, like Patty has been that person. Like she's been everything for me and the kids because she's freed up time for me when she probably should have taken it for herself, but that's not who she is, right? And her mother's exactly the same way, so is her sister. So, thank you. You know, it's a long way to come, right?
It is, but I don't think that we can do it if we don't have a partner that is willing to shoulder it for a little while. We just call it carrying the firewood. It's like somebody would carry the firewood, somebody else is warming themselves, and then when you get tired, then the other person just sort of switch off, and somebody's always got to be getting the wood, and somebody else gets to warm up for a while, so it works.
Okay, I want to read another little piece. Can we do that?
Yes.
Okay, this is just a real short thing to kind of, I guess, set the backstory a little bit with this trickster character, but here it is. This is just very short. An eye long since opened has cracked. Light tenderly slips through the breach to paint delicately in muted tones on the darkness that has prevailed in there for far too long. Countless seasons have passed since he vanished. Many moons have come and gone since he holed up in the shining mountains, shuddering his eyes to the world. And the world down below has changed.
Well, I was just gonna want to make people now read the whole thing. I'm not gonna ask you questions anymore.
And now for a message from our sponsors. Find this at your no. Yeah, good segue.
It's really beautiful. Like, it's really beautiful. It makes me want to read it a lot.
So that, like, it's not all like that, but I hope, because I'm not that pretty all the time, and neither is the trickster. But I mean that there are moments where I delve into poetry, and it's kind of bizarre because you mentioned poetry, and I don't really consider myself a poet. Well, because I don't know what structure is. Like, I have no idea
Have
what
you read
structure.
my stuff? Like,
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, but I think, well, maybe you and I kind of work on the same sort of
Yeah.
ideals in that it just comes out like that, right? I don't know. If you read my stuff, well, I mean, I think I wrote that kind of in, does that look like a poem? Because I think
No, but
doesn't.
no.
Okay, well, there you go.
Don't censor stuff.
Did it sound like a poem? Did it sound like a poem? No?
It kind of does.
Or it's just flowery words make it sound like a poem? Because not all
No.
poems are flowery words.
I
Leonard
think
Cohen puts it.
poetry is like, it doesn't necessarily have to have that, like a stanza or Shakespearean kind of stuff, but it's got a rhythm by itself.
Right.
And the way you cut it, like you cut them before the end of the sentence, so it's prose, but it's poetry. So
Well, and I
it's called
think
prose
I
poetry.
put it down on paper in the way that I think somebody would read it, which is the way that I made it sound. And maybe that structurally isn't correct, but I don't give a shit.
No, it's called free verse. You can do what you want.
Oh, good.
Yeah, just. Okay, so let's talk just a little bit more. Do you prefer to read or write fiction or nonfiction?
Both.
Okay, tell me.
Both. And actually, if you saw the full title of this, a work of fiction that is 100% true, I mean, that speaks to it right there. I mean, that's a bit of a trickster thing
Did
to
they
say,
take
isn't
that
it?
off the front?
No, they didn't.
They didn't?
Actually, no, they didn't. And I would be pissed if they did, because I think that's super important, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that speaks to the trickster, and that speaks to Canada and America and Turtle Island and what happened here, and the burial of things and the emergence of things again, right?
Yeah.
And we've got to get to the part of what is fiction and what is the truth, right?
Well, and I think that's probably like where your book is going to be. Maybe there's a reason why your book is not like on the shelf right now. It's going to take a bit of time, but when it comes out, it's going to be at exactly the right time.
Well, and that was it. So Kateri Ekwenzi Dam, if you're watching, she owns Kigadance Press they're based on the Cape Croker Reserve in Ontario. It was one of the first 2 Indigenous-owned publishing houses in the country. And, I think she's been very patient with me and wanted me to do certain other things, but also probably not realizing just how that she was dealing with an entire neophyte. I really have no idea how any of this works, right? And she didn't know that at the time. And I'm grateful that we had these conversations. But I did go to an emerging writers. I got a scholarship for an emerging writers course at the Banff Center last fall.
What?
Yeah, baby.
Never said?
And I had a mentor, and it was Michelle Good, if anybody's read 5 Little Indians. And I mean, it's just a very impactful book, and she's a very impactful woman. And some of the conversations that we had, oh, by the way, she was my mentor, and I was a mentee. I didn't even know there was such a thing. I thought that was a candy or a breath mint. But anyway, some of the things that she said to me made me want to rethink some of the parts. So COVID kind of put a binder on certain things, and then I put a binder on the rest, because it is, I guess, important that it comes out right, and these times are important. I mean, I do look at this as a bit of it's a story. It can be both very humorous at times, which some people might not like that kind of humor, but because that's the trickster, right? But then it's also meant to tell a bit of a history that people need to hear, because we can't get to the truth or to reconciliation until we really get to that truth and own it. And then it is just a bit of a story of hope that we get it right in the end, right? So that's kind of
Getting it right. That's really interesting. Like even as when I was talking last week with Ailsa, and she was talking about how the idea is not to get things published or get things published or get them out there or be a writer, and like don't expect it to happen really, really fast. Number one, it doesn't, and number two, it's not right to push your work. That like you can't just push it and so like get it published and then you look at it in a few years and go, oh.
Yeah, well, everything
It's a
has
bit better,
happened, right? Since the beginning, everything has happened at its own pace,
Yeah.
and whether I liked it or not, this was being
Do you
dictated
mean the
to me.
world or just your book?
Well, the book and the world, I
Yeah.
suppose, but the book, was being dictated to me, and I was
Yeah.
putting it down, and that was at its own pace, and so the publishing of it will be at its own pace.
Yeah.
The way and the place where we're at this moment in time in Canada or on Turtle Island, U.S., in the world for that matter, it's sort of imperative that we get things right as soon as possible, but I don't know if that's possible or if getting things right is possible.
Yeah.
But all I know is we owe it to a lot of people to try,
Yeah.
And, unfortunately we live in this digital age and whatnot, and all of our devices and stuff, we're having a conversation. As I remember in the old days, who did this? And you forget, and then 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 days later, I remember, you want to call them up. Now you just Google, tell me who did this, and there it is.
Yeah.
So people want problems solved in the same manner. That it doesn't work that way. It's going to take time, but maybe there's parts of me that are impatient for at least the building blocks to be laid out so people can start putting them together, right?
Yeah.
And those building blocks are there. They're there. And, there's some people in the room here tonight who've helped put those building blocks in there, but they can't help everyone build the damn thing, right? You gotta roll up your sleeves, right? And so I think this maybe was part of my contribution to getting it right. I don't know if it's going to prove to be a great contribution or whatnot. That'll be up to the reader, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But I am impatient. I'm an impatient person sometimes, but I know that that's not really a good idea in the moment.
Not with the book, no.
Because it would be contrary to the way
Yeah.
the whole damn thing rolled out anyway, right?
Yeah.
So why am I doing it to myself now, right?
Yeah. It's kind of cool though when you're ready for it, because one of the novels that I had written was like 300 pages of poetry. And then I went off to Saskatchewan and did a writer's workshop. And the person who was my mentor said, this isn't poetry, which I took offense to, but he said it's a novel. And I'm like, oh. And it took 3 years to turn it into a novel from that, like from 300 pages to smaller and prose. And then you think, wow, what would have happened if somebody would have just said, yeah, sure, we'll just publish it as poetry, and it was like mediocre poetry with a great story, but the story didn't have time to come to the top.
Well, I hope it can be both.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm going back to the drawing board because it's intermingled that way. And I think there have been people who've even mentioned it to me, because there are very few people who have actually read it, and that have actually. Dr. Paul Garreau from the University of Alberta is a making man who works in the Indigenous department there. He's read it and wrote me a really great piece that I'm hoping to put at the,
Like a forward?
Yeah, like a forward in the book. Carrie Newman, another really important human being. If anybody knows of the witness blanket, he's the man who created that. He's read and endorsed it. And I don't know, I think there's something about those two people in particular that they're maybe they have a heart and a spirit that can live in all those different worlds, even if it's all in one piece.
Yeah.
And maybe the rest of the world needs to be a little bit more fluid that way, because that's the way it's going to be delivered, so to speak. I don't know.
This is going to be awesome. I can hardly wait to read it.
Yeah, me too.
One of the questions...
Sorry, audience that's listening, hopefully.
No worries.
One of the other questions was about the process. Did you shop around? Like, how does somebody take all of your stuff, like you're writing, you're jotting it down in a journal while people are out on a tour boat in Moline, and then it's on an iPad, then it's knocking at the sock drawer. Like, how did you start? What did you do?
I didn't.
So they came to you? They were?
No.
Okay.
I don't know why, but again, this is all, I mean, it's fluid in the way that it was born and the way and the direction that it's traveling. I went to one place only, and that was Cattery's publishing house.
Did you Google
I've
that
never
house?
met her before.
Yeah.
I still haven't met her, though we've talked on the phone and whatnot. And I just, for whatever particular reason, said to myself, I want them. I want that publishing house, because I don't know why. It felt that's the way it was supposed to be. So I sent it to her, and I didn't know, what am I supposed to do? I asked you. I had no idea what to do. What do I do? And you told me, and so I said, send them, don't send them the whole thing, send them what? Send them a piece. What piece? I don't know.
Oh,
So
God. Oh,
I
God, I
just
know.
sent
It's so
them
hard.
the first like 20 pages.
Yeah.
And it was a while before the answer came, and I said, how long am I supposed to wait before,
Before I panic.
Well, you even said, don't even expect an answer back. So give it a couple months or whatnot. And I don't know how long it was, but one day Patty said to me, you know what? I think you might want to start thinking about 6 months or something had gone by. You might want to start thinking about shopping that around. Yeah, I was just thinking about that. And the very next day she walks in with her phone. The emails come to her phone and she says, look at this.
Oh my God.
And it was funny. Like, it was just the day after she brought it up,
Yeah.
right? And so again, I mean, everything for a reason. I don't know
You
what it
start
is.
smelling it, I think. And that's why you start talking about it, and then you go, oh, and there it is. Boom.
Yeah, so I guess, this, like, I've watched some of the other pieces in this whole series, and there are people with processes and whatnot, and I'm that jerk who just blows it all up and just, I don't know how it works. I don't. So I just bumbled my way through it, which is like basically what I've done with my whole life.
Well, it seems to be working out.
Well,
for you.
it
You
does
got
and it
that,
doesn't.
So that's all.
It does and it doesn't. But when it does, good. And when it doesn't, I mean, I have a beautiful wife and 3 lovely children. That's a testament to that something worked, right? But then I also have like a criminal record. So, sometimes it doesn't. But whatever. This is
But you
just
still
my
travel, so that's
path.
fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But I don't know. So I don't know what to tell people when they ask me. Oh, go talk to her. That's what I did. That's the process.
Well, I think that's it, though. You find somebody.
Oh, by the way, she costs a lot of money. Yeah.
No. I think you brought a beer over. I think we had pine spruce beer.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, we did.
Yeah, right on the picnic
Yeah,
table.
yeah.
So, and on that note, that I think that was one of the things that did come out of the other sessions was people saying that it's important to have relationships. And yeah, you can Google stuff and you can find out, but there's something that made you like find out where the publishers are and who they are and where you should go. But there's something about that, something that just clicks, and you wanted that particular publisher, and it worked out for you.
And the other thing, the mentor thing, I think is pretty important. If you can find somebody, and it doesn't, I suppose, it doesn't necessarily have to be a published writer, but somebody who you think, who you've read their stuff and you really appreciate and you understand them for who they are, and you're, they're important to you, and they're going to read it and just be really honest with you, about it. That is gold.
Yeah. Well, do you think that would be like advice that you would give to somebody to just find some other reader for your work?
I sent it to Nikki a few years ago. It was bare bones then. And I mean, the kind of commentary I got back was kind of what I needed to hear. Like, basically, it was like, what a beautiful skeleton.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just kind of what I needed to hear. Okay, well, at least I've got the beautiful skeleton. I can start to build the rest of the body from there, right?
Yeah.
So,
and then you gotta wonder, I thought it was done. What do you mean?
well, yeah, I mean, you do.
Skeleton.
You do. And then I guess you come to that point, and so this is probably more so with artists, like, who painters and whatnot. Like, when do you know you're done? When do you get to that point where you're like, crap, I should have stopped? Because you've now soldered this onto it, right? And
You
it's
check
like,
big gold on the edge, stop.
right,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, I mean, that's the other thing. When is it finished? When is it actually finished? Maybe somebody needs to tell you, dude,
It's done.
yeah, you're done. You're totally done. So, yeah.
I think if it goes over 900 pages, like Ken Follett's.
No, those books are important. They're important.
Very important.
They're very important. You can kill all kinds of creatures with them.
All the trees. Kill all the trees.
And then the insects.
Do you have a website?
No.
Okay, so how are we would we just Google you? Actually, we Googled them because we couldn't find, like there's nothing about Joe Urie. There's the tour company, and there's work to do with tourism, and there's all these other things, but there's nothing. There's no like insight into Joe Urie. So Holly was like, so what am I supposed to use?
It does pop up on Amazon, but there's no even picture in the
No.
placeholder or anything. They just, what is it, the ISBN number? Who's the librarian here? ISBN or whatever? Yeah, like it's there, it's secured. What is that damn thing anyway? See,
Yeah,
that's how.
ISBN?
Yeah.
It holds all the information.
It's the only thing that matters.
Holy kryptonite, that's
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Because then you tell Canon or Can Copy, you tell Access Copyright, and you register your title and the ISBN number, and then you make money for the rest of your life.
But somebody else does that for you, right?
Come on, we'll be
Because
fine.
I don't know what you just said.
Blah 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 blah.
Right.
So you ready to read some more?
Sure. How are we doing for time?
It's 10 after. We got 20 minutes.
Alrighty.
Lots.
Okay. I guess we'll go into the piece to give you a little bit of an introduction to what came next, and then maybe later, if we have time, we'll jump into something maybe, or maybe not. Okay, chapter 1. In the beginning came the end. It was never supposed to be that way. In the time before now, when the buffalo and the people who were here before were suddenly replaced on the Great Plains, Old Man Coyote began to grow weary. Oh, sorry, let me stop and tell you something. First of all, Coyote doesn't normally resonate with me, but I think Coyote resonates with a lot of other human beings. So I don't know why the trickster came to me as Coyote.
I'm
But
not
I
gonna
argue.
explain how come you say coyote and I say coyote? Because we've already done this on
I don't know,
that.
is that
Yeah,
an American and
It's
Canadian?
huge. It's huge and it never ends.
The trickster's abundant wellspring of energy had become parched by a drought that was precipitated by a deluge of obscure feelings of emptiness, floods of strange nothingness that suggested his usefulness had somehow run its course, which was peculiar to say the least, as the trickster had never known anything of redundancy, or usefulness for that matter. He just knew that he was, and for the trickster that had always been enough. And why should he know otherwise? His world, the natural world, was organized chaos, and Coyote thrived in such living conditions. The sudden strange sense of being, or rather the lack thereof, was entirely foreign to him, a perplexing conundrum that originated with the arrival of the lighter-skinned people, those who came from nowhere across the big salt waters at the eastern edge of the Turtle. Long before and up to the curious appearance of these strangers, back when Turtle Island was whole, the people who were here before had an intimate understanding of their own place in the natural world. This was because they had long ago realized their own connection to it. They were of it, and that they owed everything to it, and not the other way around. They fully appreciated that nature had its own organization, and although they occasionally desired an explanation for some of the things they could not explain, they acceptingly understood that not everything was intended to be explained. It was as it should be. The sun came up as the moon went down, and somewhere in between the sun and the moon lived the trickster. And the trickster, Old Man Coyote, Napi, Raven, Iktomi, Nanabush, Gluskap, Chi, Jean, Wisakajak, whatever name or form he chose to go by at the time or place, was their answer for those things that otherwise might remain a mystery. This was the way it had been since the beginning, when Raven stole the sun. Yet to here came the lighter-skinned people, those who had sailed all the way from nowhere and found themselves standing on the back of the Turtle, those who came to stay. There was something very unsettling about these settlers, something that didn't sit well with the trickster right from the start. His eyes narrowed to slits as he tried to pinpoint it. Perhaps it was a simple misunderstanding, a small matter of miscommunication. He wanted to like them. More importantly, he wanted them to like him. He was like that. But he found this next to impossible because of that something, and it pained him deeply in places he did not know existed. Perhaps it was the fact that not long after they arrived on Turtle Island, these settlers began to cultivate a complete disregard for the natural order of things, which in essence was a complete disregard for himself. Or perhaps there is no perhaps. The settlers' unsettling contempt for the natural order of things began in the hinterland. It started with the decimation of Amisk, the beaver, and was followed by the destruction of Pasquawimostos, the buffalo. Soon thereafter, their focus became the hinterland itself, the forest, the fish, the water, even the very air they breathed. And when that was no longer enough to satiate them, the settlers went after those things that lay hidden, buried deep beneath their feet. The intention of these settlers was to bend the will of the land and everything that lived upon it, over it, and under it, to that of their own, because somehow, somewhere along their road, they had made a wrong turn, which in turn led them to mistakenly believe that dominance was to be their destiny, and the manifestation of this ideology left no room in their lives for a being such as the trickster. That room, the one in which Coyote lived, had already been filled with what the settlers perceived to be logic. The culture of these settlers was of a particular mind, a peculiar mind, one that suggested they were entitled to know everything, and as such their continued existence not only expected answers, it demanded them. It was this appetite for logic that made Coyote feel incredibly thin around them, like a shadow. And when he peered deeply into the eyes of the settlers to see if he could see something of himself in there, he saw nothing, not even the slightest reflection. It was concerning to say the very least, as the absence of himself was fertile ground in which he could grow low opinion. And so it was, surrounded by this specific set of circumstances, that it didn't take long for the trickster to come to the stark realization that he wasn't particularly fond of these settlers, nor was he enamored by the way they ran their affairs. Perhaps this was because it also didn't take long for the trickster to realize that they weren't at all fond of him or his. Such was the way things were when the trickster rolled up his sleeves, spit into his palms, and decided to show these settlers that there was no place for their mentality in this world. He became fully intent on forcing them to understand that, barring a change of heart, a return across the big salt waters in the east would be in everyone's best interest. His, theirs, and most importantly, those of the people who were here before. Yet despite all of the trickster's grandiose efforts, despite all of his posturing and gnashing of teeth, the settlers paid absolutely no attention to his machinations, which effectively turned the tables on him. This in turn served to impose the opinion that it was the trickster himself who did not belong, and regardless of any more protestations that he might have, the trickster's world now in fact belonged to them. This new reality left the trickster feeling tired and hollow, floundering adrift in a sea of abject humiliation, and rather than despair over it, he simply chose to slip below the surface, which he did. And so much since then has passed. It has been more than 100 years since Wounded Knee, 200 since David Thompson accurately sketched a portrait of the right profile of the turtle's face, 300 since the company of adventurers set forth from the great inland sea that came to be known as Hudson's Bay, and it has been more than 500 years still since Christopher Columbus's mistake gave birth to Indians, and Giovanni Caboto laid claim to all of the trickster's world for a far-off crown who ruled everything and everyone from the other side of nowhere. The back of the turtle is a mess, and the need for balance and levity has never been greater. The time for the return of the trickster is now.
Can we clap?
Yeah. So not so much the skeleton anymore. I think you got some good meat on that. It's good bones.
Yeah, and I think I think so. There's some parts there where it gets a lot lighter than that. Lots of fun because, of course, it's the trickster. Like certainly he ends up in Las Vegas, and boy, does he have a good time there. When he gets to Salt Lake City, he meets the Mormons, and he says that famous line, "You had me at polygamy," which was the Tom Cruise singing whatever. What was that movie? But yeah, so I mean, there is levity because that is inherent in the trickster's being, but it is very important for him to get it right.
I think it's important to have that levity because otherwise, when you're serious all the time, it's like it's like suspense, right? And people can't live with suspense all the time, or fear all the time, and a little bit of levity just to break it up. And you go, okay, breathe. Okay, now keep on with the horror show,
And you would have used that a lot at school with the kids.
Yeah, for sure.
Tons. And you know what? So another thing that was sort of an impetus of the way this evolved, in 1987, I was in Germany, and I was sitting around with some young Germans and having a beer. And out of nowhere, I just said, so, we're making conversation. So what did they teach you about the Holocaust in school? Don't you say this word Holocaust ever again to me. And I was like, oh, shit. What? And my understanding was the way that they were being taught in that moment was as if they were the ones who did it. and they were rejecting the reconciliation process that Germany was undertaking at the time. And I fear the same thing in Canada, that if it's not delivered in a manner, I've seen it already.
Yes.
I was doing some work for the Métis Nation. I was in Elk Island Park, and I was going for a run. And this young kid, 18 years old, comes along. He's like, well, what are you doing? I'm going for a run. Can I go with you? He was going to go on a hike, and he'd never been there before. Sure, let's go. So we were going on this run, and through that, we came to the conversation of why I was there and whatnot. We got into this conversation, and he just graduated. I said, so what did they teach you about all of this in school? And he stopped, and he said, I don't want to hate my grandparents. I was like, oh shit, it started.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not the way it's meant to unfold, because we won't get anywhere if that's the way it's going to be, right?
Yeah. It's going to take that time. Like, there's the grieving time, and I think if you interrupt that grieving time, then it can't go forward. So there's got to be some time where it is sad and it is terrible and it's horror filled and it's.
But you gotta hear it.
You
gotta take it to heart, and you gotta listen.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
so just a little bit further from that, like, are you superstitious? Do you have any
No.
habits?
Yeah, coffee. A better habit first thing in the morning.
That's not superstition. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you have something like to procure luck?
Hockey
or
superstitions, that's it.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
if I walk into the dressing room and you're sitting in my spot, it's like, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, that's my spot. You know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, but otherwise,
Is that
no.
superstition or
Oh,
just an
there's
asshole?
there's rules. There's
Oh, rules.
There's
Oh,
rules, yeah.
okay.
Nobody says them. There's rules.
What about if you find money on the ground? You have that, like if it's on the head, you pick it up, and if it's on the tail, you don't?
No, I've never really been, thankfully, I married Patty, because I don't have a sense for money at all. If I wasn't married to her, I would be penniless, and I don't know, I think I'd still be
Maybe
happy.
you'd be finding more money.
Yeah,
on
maybe
the
I'd be looking for money on the
Yeah,
ground, and then
yeah.
I'd go, I wouldn't care what side's up, so long as it's a toonie at least, right?
My grandfather had taught us that if you find a dime, he had this gift where he could, if he had a wart, he would take a dime, rub it on, and he'd buy the wart from you, and then he'd throw the
What
dime
the-
away. Just hang on, it gets
I
better.
love them.
Yeah, and so your wart would go away, 100%, and then we'd be walking around looking for the dime. But if it was heads up, you could keep the dime, but if it was down, you couldn't, because it still had a wart on it. And so if you picked it up, you get the wart back. God, there's so many rules. So many rules.
Okay, you gotta write this book in your book
Yeah.
of short stories, because that's a wicked story.
Yeah, I want folding money though. Like, if you find folding money, I think there's no warts. It's
No.
Yeah. Do you have 2 words that would describe you at your best?
Oh, can I steal someone else's words?
I don't.
Okay,
Sure.
to steal from one of my all-time heroes, Muhammad Ali. Me, we.
Ooh, nice.
Because that's it, right? I mean, that just sums everything up. That's me at my best. Me, we. Because there is no me without we. So
Love it.
that's the best.
Okay. What does success look like to you?
No idea. I don't know that success. Maybe success is a feeling and not something that. What does it look like? How does it feel? Maybe.
Okay, so what does success feel like to you?
Sleeping through the night.
Hallelujah.
If you wake up in the morning and you feel rested, maybe yesterday was a really good day. That was successful, right? I don't know. I don't know. I think I'm pretty successful in that I've made a lot of great friends and acquaintances in this town and other places in the world, and that's successful. I don't know that
And your kids too.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, but that's part of that whole thing. That falls back to the me, we thing. Right?
Yeah.
That's success right there.
Yeah.
All of it wrapped into one.
If you could live anywhere else in the world, where would you live? Florida?
Yeah, sure. I'd live there. I'd live anywhere in the world for a time.
Yeah.
I it's currently with the way that it's feeling. I mean, Jasper, this hostile takeover. Can I say that out loud here?
Just did, yeah.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I've been here like a lot of the people in the room a long time, and we knew Jasper as a different place at one point in time, and there's parts of it, and I'm sure when I got here in 1988, the old timers that then were going, this isn't the same place it used to be. Probably his fault, right? You know, but am I being that guy, or is it really changed that dramatically, right? So there's moments when I'm like, God, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to be a part of this, but then that's irresponsible. So
Kind of interesting to see where it's going to
yeah.
go.
There's so many moving pieces there, but so if I could be anywhere and live anywhere, yeah, I'd go anywhere at any time, so long as I know I can get back to the places where I'm most comfortable, I guess.
Like wandering around.
That's part of it, but I mean, here, this is comfortable. I mean, being amongst these people here, this is comfortable.
I think we could do this again.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure. Why not?
Yeah.
Where do you want to be in, let's say, 3 years?
I have never ever looked at life in that way ever in my life.
Well, tonight's the night.
Sitting in that chair.
Woo! That's a good one. Okay, somebody write that down. He'll be here.
I think that's, again, it's a moving piece. So then you're sitting here and I'm sitting there and we're having this conversation. But
that would be cool.
But
Yeah.
I'm directing conversation. And then maybe I'm sitting there and Nikki's sitting there and Raymond's sitting here. And yeah, like just movable pieces. That's where I want to be. I want to be one of those movable pieces in 3 years, just as I am right now.
Okay.
So let's call it flexible. Because I'm
Okay.
not.
What would be your dream job besides sitting in this chair?
I've never dreamed of work. No, never.
If you could do something that's in your skill set wheelhouse and get paid for it and not go to jail.
Again, that falls back onto the money things, which is really funny because I've been doing some things lately, and a dream of mine, an aspiration that I have, and I'm in the process of it is, and you know, we're working with a lot of people in the Indigenous world to hopefully better communities, build economies for communities and stuff like that. I don't get paid to do it, and I don't really care about the money. There have been moments, and recently, where I've done a few things where they then say, you know, here for your time, we want to know how much money. I'm like, So I said, call Patty. I don't do that. Like, I didn't realize that was going to be a conversation, and I don't feel comfortable with that. So
I know.
that doesn't mean I want to volunteer for everybody.
You can still take the money.
There's things that you can ask me for sure, but don't be surprised if I say no.
Bring beer.
Yeah, okay.
What are you reading right now?
Ooh, Soul of a Butterfly, Muhammad Ali.
Is it really?
Yeah, he wrote it.
Wow.
He wrote it, well, with the help of his daughter, Hana Ali. And it's something that he wrote later in life. And it's interesting because, I mean, everybody here knows who Muhammad Ali is and what a big character he was. And I went to his gravesite recently, like a month ago, and it's a very nondescript, which I was expecting the greatest of all time type thing.
Like a statue.
Yeah, and I think this is the part of Ali that nobody reads, the man he became, which is really beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful.
What kind of man did he become?
Maybe something that I'd aspire to be. I don't know that I'm ever going to get there, but his empathy, his compassion for all things, a very spiritual man. You know, of course, he was of the Islamic faith, and I don't look at faith, and I don't like religion per se as much as I really like spirituality. I don't think it needs to have these confines and these rules and these things. You know, it's just it's a thing, right? And we're all part of it. But Ali kind of came to a place later on in life, and it's beautiful.
Maybe
His
that's
words
it
are
though, like
beautiful.
it's like perspective. Like, you know,
Yeah.
live long enough to get that. That's a luxury.
Yeah. You know, it's about the journey, I guess, right? And his journey took him to that place. Maybe you'll get right back to where you started. I don't know. I have no idea.
But you do. You're all curled up in a bed.
Yeah.
With any luck.
Yeah.
Well, on that happy note, that's it.
Okay. Are we done?
We just burnt an hour, yeah. So
We're
that's
done.
it. I know.
So the book is not on the shelves at the moment. It will be on the shelves.
It will be on the shelves.
I'll sign them.
Thank you very much, everybody who showed up in the
Thank you,
audience.
guys.
And
The open mic.